This is going to be a little bit different. This is going to be our video 3 of our series on buying old hand planes. Okay, so I've talked about in the first video, talked about the parts of a plane, the sizes of a plane, and the brands you can kind of look toward buying. Second video, we talked about how you can identify a Stanley from a plane that just has a Stanley iron in it and is actually just a no-name plane, or some of the characteristics of a no-name plane, and some of the characteristics you want to avoid in planes. Okay, so this video is going to be a little bit unusual. I don't know if there's any videos out there. I know I could just Google it on buying Ohio planes, and I'm not really going to talk about buying Ohio planes as much as I'm just going to talk about Ohio planes for a little bit. Okay. I like Ohio planes because they're a little bit different. Everybody and their mother's got a Stanley. Why? Because Stanleys were good. Stanleys were good. Nobody doubts that Stanleys were good, and you know, people can dispute it, but they're wasting their breath. Okay. And something I just thought of. A lot of this stuff only applies mostly to the United States. There's going to be some British brands out there like Record or Marples and some of the other ones. They're also really good as well, and they're also very similar to Stanley. So the rules still apply. But those brands are also ones that you can look for that would not let you down, okay? So I've got Ohio's because they're a little bit different, and most of the stuff I like to do is just a little bit different. Like I said in the first video, the numbering system for these begins with a 0. All they did was take the Stanley numbers and throw a 0 in front of it. So this is a 03, 04, 04.5, 05, 05.5, and my 08, which is the 8 that I use all the time. I don't know why I didn't have it out already, okay? And to keep with telling you how much I paid for these, I bought this off eBay. I actually made an offer, and the guy accepted it. I want to say it was 30 bucks. This one was on eBay. I think I paid 25, 30 on eBay for that one. This one I bought locally for 20 bucks. I completely stripped it down and sanded the knob and the tote. Shellacked it, repainted the sole and the number 8 also. The number 5, all I did was put lacquer on the knob and the tote, as well as the 4.5, or the 4.5. Unfortunately, this is, I can't tell if that's stripped or it looks like just a screw. So, unfortunately, I got that issue to deal with that on that. I've got my grandfather's Stanley 4.5, which is probably never going to use, and I've got a brand new Veritas 4.5 that is most likely to be the one I use. So this one I'll fix up, but these are, for the most part, I keep these for the shelf. But they are definitely users. I do use this one because my Stanley number 8 that I have right now is like 1860s, which isn't much older than this one, to be honest, but it's older than this one, and I don't really want to mess that one up. So their purposes are the same, all right? So the purposes I explained in the first one, the 3, 4, 4.5 are your smoothing planes for that final finish. The 5 and the 5.5 are your jack planes. They're gonna take that rough wood and they're gonna bring it into something you can work with, whether it's, you know, the cupping or just an unfinished surface. You can get there with this. You dial in this number 5 just right, and it will do a lot of what this will do as well. There's a lot of number 6s on eBay, but since I have a lot of number 6s in general right now, I've been avoiding them. I'll eventually get them. And there's a few 7s on there as well, but I've already got 2 Stanley 7s. And then this was my first joiner plane here, or second, sorry, because I had those 2 Stanleys, or third. So this one I got at a local store for, how's that? Oil. For 20 bucks. And for 20 bucks, you really can't beat something like this, okay? So, like I said in the last video, you got to determine whether you're buying to collect or you're buying to use. If you're buying to collect, me repainting these would have destroyed all collector, well, yeah, pretty much all collector value right there. Another thing, as I mentioned, that affects collector value is when the previous owners from back in the day put their identification on the side so they can identify who they belong to. That's one way of marking it. I've got another plane that's got, it's not one of these. It's got like hash marks cut on the side That was another kind of a maker's mark. Wooden planes are a little bit different. And I actually kind of like seeing those. And you grab a wooden plane, you got like 4 different craftsmen that have owned it in the last 150 years. So it's pretty different. So back to these. Okay, so they're very similar to Stanley's. They follow that Bailey style. The pieces of them are going to be essentially identical. Well, they're identical as in you're going to have the same ones, but they're going to look a little bit different, okay? So sizes are going to be virtually identical as well. So one of the things you're going to notice differently with an Ohio tool versus your Stanley tools is the direction that this depth knob spins, okay? You'll see that it's spinning to the left and it's going back. Okay, what that does is that advances the iron, spinning it to the right-hand thread, okay? And you may say like, well, yeah, that's normal. That's like every screw there is, okay? That draws the iron back. Stanley in the late 1800s reversed their thread pattern. So they have what's called a left-hand thread. This is a right-hand thread. So if I spin a Stanley to the left, it'll retract the iron. If I spin it to the right, it'll advance the iron, which is what this does, okay? So when this goes out that way, it pulls back there and pushes down on the chip breaker here. And that's how it advances the iron deeper into the cut, okay? That Stanley number 8 that I have that doesn't have any casting on there is what's called a Type 4. It's 1860s time frame. It was before this. I think it was the last year before a lateral adjustment lever. Those ones have a right-hand thread like this. I think it's a Type 7, and everything after that, maybe Type 6, they switch to that left-hand thread. So if you switch back and forth between Ohio and Stanley like I do, you get mixed up sometimes, and I'll go to retract the blade here, and I end up advancing it. Or I go to retract the blade on my Stanley's, thinking I'm on an Ohio, and it'll advance the blade. So there can be some difficulties there. It's really minor. Lateral adjustment lever and the Frog are very similar to the early Stanleys with the same time frame. The same little washer right there. They've got a what we call a twisted lateral. Usually it's just a single piece of metal that's twisted to the side. And that's your primary differences right there. The tote is going to be shaped slightly different. And then eventually, in the 1920s time frame, Stanley came out with a considerably larger knob right here. These ones never did. This company actually went out of business in 1920. It's a merger originally between Auburn Tools in Auburn, New York, about an hour and a half south of me, and Ohio Tools, somewhere in Ohio, I don't know. And there was a Thistle brand in there somewhere at that merger point as well. So the older ones, like this 4.5 here, with a really weird, like double stamped iron, I'm not sure if you can see that, it says Ohio Tool, Thistle. Somehow it got double stamped. Unfortunately, it's not like money. I don't think that makes it any more valuable. But the Thistle is a result of that first time period right after that merger. My number 8 over here, I didn't notice it until later. It's got this kind of ellipse. It says Ohio Tools Company, Auburn, New York, USA on the bottom. And in the middle, it says Thistle brand. Okay. I didn't realize that until recently when I was looking at this one. But for the most part, the majority of the ones you're going to find are going to have that globe with Ohio. It says Ohio Tool Company, Columbus, Ohio, USA, Auburn, New York. Okay, so that's the majority of the logos I've seen like that. And there's one other 5 that I saw at an antique store in the town of Weedsport, New York. They wanted $35 for it. At the time, that seemed high to me. And I believe it was missing a couple components too, which did make it high. So I don't know. I passed on it, and I have no reservations on that. So the iron, okay. The iron on the Ohio tools is sort of like a carryover from wooden hand planes. And I'm going to pause this video real quick. I'm going to go get a cut. Okay, so I went and got my Stanley number 5 here from approximately, I would say approximately the same era. Side by side, oh, that's the one that's missing the screw. I knew I was missing a screw on one of these. I found it later. Side by side, you see a lot of design similarities. See the similarities in the frog here. Older Stanleys, the rib down here kind of changes from one year to the next. So that rib is kind of what set them apart and gave them a little bit more stability in the long run. Probably one of the advantages they got. Stanley's frog evolved constantly. Here, okay, so I'm turning this Stanley to the right. The knob is coming back and it's pushing that down, which is going to advance the iron. Okay, I go to the left. The brass knob goes forward, pulls the iron back. Go to the left. See that? It's driving the iron forward. Okay, that's the difference in that thread I was just talking about. Okay, but the real reason I got that was to show you the difference in the iron. And this is one of the reasons why I'm an Ohio Tools fan, despite not really liking the state of Ohio that much. Okay, look at the difference in the irons. Okay, this is the original iron from that Stanley number 5. You can see that it's well used. I mean, you see how long they normally are. See the chip breakers are almost the same length. See how much of that iron was used up? It's almost all of it. Look at that. That is just amazing. Okay, so there's a couple different things here. One, Ohio has a tapered iron. That's what we call this, a tapered iron. It's very thick. It's got a bevel down here that's pretty heavy. And it's just a super heavy gauge blade. And one of the things you look for in the stability of the plane, how I talked about Stanley had that rib which added stability. The idea of the frog and a good frog is to reduce chatter. So when you're going across that hard wood, the blade's not skipping along and giving you a rippled surface that looks really low quality. Okay, this super heavy iron helps to eliminate that, and that's one of the great things about it. Okay, I mean, look at the size difference in that right there. Okay, and then one last thing that's just a slight difference. I'm not really sure what it goes to. There's not like a hex that you could use it on. Is all of these except my 8 over here, my 08, sorry, have this hexagon shape in the iron. Not sure why. It's just what they chose, and it's just something different about Ohio's. So that's a quick rundown on Ohio's. They're a good tool company. I'm going to buy the rest if I can. There's a number 2 on eBay, but it's like $300 and I just don't need it that bad. And they've got other tools as well that are not just the planes. I haven't really seen any in person. And they got a lot of wooden planes. Most of their history was involved in wooden planes. So great company. New York and Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, and Auburn, New York, not far from me. And you got all the same sizes as a Stanley with a 0 in front of them. You probably get some of these for a little bit less money. They're definitely not as common, so if you're looking for something that's a little rarer, a little different, something your friends don't have, Ohio's are the way to go. But don't go buying them all up because I still like to be able to afford them. Got that super heavy iron, makes it a great user. And the main difference you'll probably see there is that the way that knob, the depth knob, is adjusted, whether it's a left-hand thread or a right-hand thread. So if you have any questions on Ohio, I'm probably not the guy that could answer them. I can try. If you go to Time Tested Tools, it's a great resource on all of these planes. It can tell you a lot about them. So good luck shopping for planes. Like I said, Stanley's great. Ohio's a viable option. And then those other ones we talked about, Sargent, Miller's Falls, Union, are all viable options. Okay? Thank you. And check us out on Facebook.